What's something you did growing up that today's generation will never understand? Story 1. In high school, my dad had a strict rule about the phone ringing after 10 p.m. So when I had a GF and wanted her to be able to call me, I would call the local theater and listen to the movie listings until the call waiting would beep and take the call without the phone ever ringing. Here's story 2. Playing outside without constant supervision from 6 years old and on, I would play for hours and hours outside in the woods, fields around my house. These days, I don't know a single parent that would allow their 8-year-old to play by themselves without constantly checking on them every 5-10 minutes. Story 3. So many. Using a payphone, having to use so many books for a school report, looking up numbers in the phone book, not drinking water all the time, going to school no matter how bad the weather was, using a card catalog, using a rotary phone attached to the wall, writing and mailing a letter, going out all day with no parents able to check on us, having 3 channels, no remotes, waiting in long lines for movies, having to run to the bathroom during commercials, no pause buttons or rewatching scenes, walking to the store to get things, having to out to get food, etc. Story 4, just in leaving. Remember those ads on TV? It's 9 p.m. Do you know where your kids are? The answer was a no. They didn't. I had left 12 hours earlier with some friends, and we were just off and about wherever the day took us. Now my friend is terrified to let his kids walk 1/4 mile to the Ing bus stop before school, has them basically low-jacked, and I don't think they'll ever be home alone until they move out. Story 5. It's 8:30 in the evening. You just remembered you have a report due first thing tomorrow morning. The library closes at 9 o'clock. Your parental unit steps on the gas and gets you to the library in time. You grab a book about, say, what to and check it out. Maybe you stop by Kinko's on the way back to photocopy a few pictures to illustrate your report. Somehow you read the book and throw something together and turn it in. Close call, but you get an A. Now you can just go online for all the info you need and maybe even the report itself. Story 6. Snow that lasts most of the whole winter. We used to make some epic snow caves and regularly get multiple 18-plus inch storms, and I grew up in New Jersey. My kids are lucky to see 6 good inches in a season. Story 7. I used to blow into video game cartridges to make them work. If a game wasn't loading, you'd take it out, blow into it like your life depended on it, and somehow that fixed it, LOL. Kids today will never get how that little trick saved so many games from not working. Story 8. We had a blast making prank phone calls. Then technology came and made it really interesting. A friend would use 3-way calling to call me, put me on hold, then call someone else. In the meantime, I would call to someone else's worst enemy, then connect back to my friend. Both of us never speaking, which left our callers both answering their phones saying, hello, hello, who is this? You called me. No, you called me. Always ended in hilarious and awkward call of confusion and cussing. Story 9. Riding in the bed of a pickup truck. Being able to not be reached when you were out of the house. Hearing a song in the radio but not knowing the title or band name, so you had to wait until the DJ said, that was hard to handle by the Black Crowes, or whatever song. Answer, we had one too. The back right door stopped being able to close properly, so my dad tied a rope to the handle, type thing, on the back left door, which we'd have to pull across us and use to tie around the handle of the back right door to hold it shut. So this rope was just pulled tight across our waists. He used to joke about how fancy we were, having seat belts in the back seats. He also used to joke about the fact that if we crashed, all of us in the back seat would be cut in half. We laughed, but in hindsight, he probably wasn't wrong. Story 10. A lot of people don't understand this unless you lived in the country or your suburb, backed onto a good spot. But we just ran out the back door every single day and went out in the literal woods for hours. Built tree forts, swam in the creek, ran through the cornfield, built rafts for the creek, turned over logs and caught salamanders and snakes with our bare hands. I had the childhood people only see in movies or dream about. It was like the early 1900s or something. I am 34. I still remember when we got a Windows 98 PC and played on Paint for hours. It all changed very quickly as I got older. The internet boomed in my tween years. Next thing you know, we were all on MSN playing online games, and a couple years after that, flip phones came out. Now I work in front of a screen every day. I wouldn't trade those years for anything, though. It really does make you a smarter, better person, IMO. Story 11. Here we go with a step-by-step. Write down list of songs from the radio, TV that I have been vibing to hit up Aries /Napster /Kazaa /Bearshare /LimeWire, whatever wasn't banned, and download. Side quest here, actually finding the song you are looking for is a fun search. Videos were worse, so much porn. Fire up your CD burner software and pray you have a blank CD left. Burn those songs onto that CD. Hope your crappy dial-up doesn't the bed in the middle. Grab your Sharpie and give it a sweet mix name. All this to have a CD with 15 18 songs to listen to in my car slash stereo slash Discman. And yes, I am also old enough to have sat by the radio waiting to record a song onto tape when it played. Story 12. Having a shared set of facts and cultural touchstones, there were 3 TV stations that had news on once a day and were judged by their accuracy and impartiality. Political talk shows were on Sunday only with actual experts. We disagreed about policy, but we agreed what the facts were. Someone like Trump never would be even considered at all a real candidate for president. Story 13. Knocking on a friend's door at the appointed time after meals to go out and run around the streets and woods with knives but no intent to harm. We built tree huts of insane engineering. I wish ID had a phone to take a pic, LOL, and furnished them with carpets and old sofas so we could sit in them and watch out on the roof and patrol the area for the next estate's kids on the roam. Stolen nails, boards, and tarps from the nearby construction sites. 10 Downing Street was the best one we made. It had 10 rooms and took about 30 pallets and loads of stoled plywood boards. I miss being 8. Story 14. Taking the free trial AOL discs from gas stations so you could have internet for a month. Except you get yelled at for tying up the phone line and couldn't use it anyways. All the AOL chat rooms and the ASL nonsense. Almao. Growing up in the 90s was wild. Story 15. My sister and I would have been considered feral children, but back in our growing up years, just about every kid was feral. Summers were spent outside, playing and hanging out. If we got thirsty, we turned on the hose and let the water run super cold. Best water ever. If we were hungry, somebody's mom always cranked out PB&J sandwiches, which we ate outside. We were always home for dinner because all that running around made us hungry. We usually cleaned our plates, then looked around for more cookies, chips, ice cream, pop, and junk food were a special treat. Our mother simply didn't buy this stuff, but we occasionally talked her into a sugary cereal like Frosted Flakes. There was no fast food except the hot dog joints, and those dogs were delicious, especially with frosty glasses of root beer. And we had popcorn. When something special was showing at the drive-in movie, Mom would pop lots of corn, dump it in a brown paper grocery bag, and shake it up with plenty of salt and butter. The only stuff we bought at the concession stand was orange pop or Cokes. There were very few hefty kids because most everybody ate home-cooked meals with lots of veggies. My favorite summer supper was green beans fresh from the garden, simmered with ham, roasting ears, garden tomatoes, and cottage cheese. I tried feeding this to my grandkids for dinner and, except for the roasting ears, they looked at me like I was nuts. My dad's mother used to dig up young dandelion greens and made wilted salad with a dressing of bacon grease, vinegar, and sugar. We thought it delicious, but I can't imagine kids today eating this stuff. The same grandma also cranked out homemade ice cream with strawberries from her garden. It was better than any ice cream sold today. Movie theaters and most shops and grocery stores had air conditioning, but nobody I knew had it at home. We survived hot summer nights with fans and open windows, but the houses stayed cool all day because moms kept the houses closed up and the shades down. And God help you if you tried running in and out of the house on hot days. We rarely talked on the phone until we were teenagers and no longer had a party line. There were at least 3 other households on our party line, including one old biddy who was either talking or listening in to everyone else. We didn't watch much television except for Saturday morning cartoons. Then we did our chores, got our allowance of 50 cents each, and took ourselves off to the neighborhood movie theater. For that 50 cents, we got to see a double feature, plus a cereal and cartoons, and still had money left over for snacks. All the kids in the neighborhood went to the movies on Saturday afternoons, and there were no parents monitoring us. If we got rowdy, we got tossed out, then got in worse trouble at home. If we got in trouble at school and had to bring home a note for our parents, you'd better believe we were lectured and grounded. Nobody went in to yell at our teacher or principal for being unfair. We quickly learned to be accountable for our actions. I apologize that this memory lane excursion has run on, but I am very glad I grew up in a time when kids were free range, and looking back, it was wonderful. Story 16. Kids getting paddled at school. It was as horrifying to me then as it is now. They'd often have another classroom walk in and stand around the edges watching, for extra humiliation. One time my brother ditched school, I think he was 10 or 11, and the principal came across the street to get him at our house and spank him. This was a major city too, not a small town thing. I never got paddled, but I accidentally walked in front of my teacher one time and was yanked all the way back across the room by my ponytail. First grade. Story 17. Topping up a call card so my parents could speak to my grandparents abroad. Now people use apps to make international calls. The relief of knowing your Nokia 3310 won't break. Paying for the bus using coins. Trusting that someone would show up on time when you've made plans. Story 18. Roam freely. I had 4 hours every day between when school ended and my parents came home. When I was like 8, I had a key to the house and wandered around finding friends and stuff to do within like a 5 or 10 square mile home range. I had an allowance, so I went to stores and bought stuff from a human at a register. I had to avoid creeps and homeless people, and we did crazy like dodge trains while jumping our bikes or explore the sewer like the Ninja Turtles. We also had to arrange our own play dates and remember them in our head, or figure out how to find our friend's house or some obscure meeting spot, like that one good climbing tree in the forest behind that one park 2 neighborhoods over. Kids nowadays do none of that stuff, and parents in my area literally get arrested for trying to let their kids play alone outside without adult supervision. Story 19. Turn a dial on the TV to change the channel. Blow in a cartridge to get a video game to work. Going to a friend's house without calling first, knocking on the door and just asking if they could come out and play studying, or doing a report at school just by going to the library and checking out book, write someone a letter, send it in the mail, wait for a response, going to a photorama to get photos developed. Story 20. Going over friends' houses to listen to new music. Most albums didn't come with lyrics, so we had to pick up the needle and replay the fuzzy parts, trying to figure out what the words were. It was very important to be up on the latest music, but I was poor. I couldn't afford to buy music. I had a rich friend who would buy all the new albums, and we'd all go to her house. Now music is disposable, like fast food. I remember the first time I heard Tommy and Woodstock, 8 Miles High by the Byrds, Working Man's Dead, James Gang, Surrealistic Pillow, Santana, Big Brother, Spirit, Allman Brothers, Cream, Jethro Tull. Story 21. When I was in high school, I used to go out rollerblading around my suburb on Sunday afternoons. No headphones because Discman skipped. No GPS. No phone, no form of entertainment at all other than my thoughts. I would go for hours and nobody would have any way of reaching me until I got home. Story 22. Latchkey kid in kindergarten. Walked by myself a mile to school every morning and back every afternoon. Let myself into an empty house and hunkered down to cartoons until my mom got home from work a few hours later. These days, leaving a 5-year-old home alone would get your ass locked up. But back then, we were all in the same boat. Story 23. Looking up the number for the movie theater in the phone book, then listening to every movie, and times it was playing until the recording got to the one you wanted. If you missed it, you had to start all over. And the TV Guide channel, having to wait for the station you wanted to know what was on, then looking away for a second and missing, and having to wait for it cycle back around. Story 24. My dad was in the Navy, and I grew up only being able to communicate with him via letter, or the very rare and short international phone call for months on end. His last deployment before retiring was the first where we were able to email, and it was a game changer. Story 25. As far as I remember, texting really didn't become a thing until the late 2000s, like 2006, 2007s. It was expensive for the most part, like 10 cents a text, both incoming and outgoing, and things like unlimited plans were not really a concept to people yet. The only people who had those plans were those with like Sidekicks or Blackberries. Most people had flip phone or those Nokia indestructible bricks. Keypads on phones was a super revolutionary idea for high schoolers around 2005. I remember in like 2007, I got my first girlfriend. I had a flip phone, but she had a Sidekick and she wanted to text rather than talk on the phone. My mom took my phone away from me after I racked up like a $40 bill over the course of like a week texting. I remember then some sort of option where you could get like, 100 texts for the entire month or something for an extra $5. I think I went through it over like 3 days. AIM was how got a hold of friend just to chat, and that was hoping who you wanted to talk to was online too. Otherwise, it was calling a landline and praying their parents were not the ones to pick up. Story 26. I started shooting competition when I was 12. The range we practiced at in the winter was the tornado shelter in the school basement. But we lived in a big ranch and I had a 50-feet range in the basement there. So I would regularly take my guns to and from school. I even had keys so I could go get them. Did a report for English or something where I went downstairs and bought them back to class to do my demonstration. I even had ammo, LOL. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. Story 27. Even the most helicopter parents still expected their kids to be out of the house on weekends and be gone nearly whole day without any real way of contacting them or any real plans other than be home by whatever time or you're going to get your ass beat. And somehow they still always knew the stupid you got yourself into and had more control over you than all these parents with smartphones and whatnot. Story 28. I grew up on the LA-Orange County border in the late 60s/early 70s. At age 10, completely unsupervised, my friends and I would grab shotguns and go hunt rabbits and turkeys in a huge, undeveloped field about half a mile from my house. Nobody ever bothered us. The police has ignored us. Today, there are no undeveloped fields, and walking down the street with shotguns would close schools while promoting a SWAT response. And we were unsupervised. If our parents had known, we would have been whipped into next year. Story 29. You've been gone all day on a trip with your parents. It's dark and you're tired. You lay down in the back seat. Mom and Dad are listening to the country station on the radio. You see the stars out the back glass of the car. Your eyes are so heavy, and for a brief moment you feel absolutely content and safe and drift off to sleep. You are the everything. Story 30. I started walking to school in 4th grade, not talking to strangers on the internet, not getting into strangers' cars, Uber, not being allowed inside the house until the streetlights came on. No TV, video games, internet, or cell phones. Pops was able to listen in on private conversations on the house phone. This was a long, long time ago, like 2004. I'm basically a dinosaur. Story 31. Bro and I going to the river on our own for the afternoon. We'd grab some snacks, the St. Bernard, and the .22. The river was a few miles from the house down an old abandoned logging road back behind the sawmill my folks owned. Those were good summer days. I remember bringing home buckets of tadpoles sometimes, raising them into frogs, then releasing them at the end of the summer, or going berry picking when the strawberries and raspberries were in season. The only big rule was if we weren't back by sundown, the folks would come looking. So usually it was time to come home when the 5 p.m. town siren blared. That's when all kids knew it was supper time. They still sound the local siren to this day, decades later. The townspeople threw a fit when they tried to retire it. Story 32. Rotary dial, bowling alley birthday parties, phone books and yellow pages. Guess what the difference? The arcade, Commodore 64, being home alone, or were we? Dial on the TV, neighborhood parents, soap operas, night and daytime soaps having a chokehold on us, nuclear war, Cold War, acid rain. Story 33. Where do I start? Changing a typewriter ribbon, manipulating rabbit ears on top of the TV, sticking tape over the VHS cassette so you could use it to record something, using a pencil/biro to wind up your audio cassettes, dragging a 3.5-in floppy icon to trash to eject it from the computer, dial-up internet sounds, using physical paper maps, map books/directories, using yellow white pages. We used to rip them up and burn them as fireplace kindling. The list could go on, but I'll stop there. Story 34. Rewinding a tape to the exact spot you want to record, entering the times you want the VCR to record, then hoping it actually recorded on the right channel in time. It was always a fingers-crossed situation. Half the time you cut off the intro or last bit of the show. Now you just hit the record to DVR button and forget about it. Story 35. Existing without the internet or cell phones. Dating without so much stress. Taking classes without electronic calculators. Bicycling without helmets. Throwing lawn darts at each other's feet as a dare. Skating without helmets or other safety gear. Driving cars without airbags or safety belts or power steering or air conditioning. Driving a car with a stick-shift transmission. Working on a car engine with your father. Tearing it down to parts. Make repairs. Then reassemble the engine and drop it back into the car. Enjoying a garage with a woodworking workshop. Making cabinets and furniture with your father. Television without any means to record it and no remote controls. Us kids were the remote control for our parents. That and adjusting the rabbit ears TV antenna. Enjoying reel-to-reel music using an analog tube amplifier. Story 36. Our parents just opening the front door and unleashing us on the neighborhood with all the other kids for the entire day. iPad kids will never be able to truly appreciate the imaginative power of a group of kids with some sticks and rocks in their imaginations, nor will they understand the chill comfort of the parking lot hangouts we'd have as teenagers. I hope somebody time travels to 1998 and stabs Steve Jobs. Smart devices enabled the global dominance of social media and the internet in general. Story 37. Sneaking into the computer room at night at home to get on AIM, MySpace, LimeWire, and random chat rooms on the desktop because computer time was monitored, ETA burning CDs on said desktop illegally, and always being afraid the FBI was going to burst in at any moment because I thought they were tracking illegal downloads SLO. A Story 38. Having to actually turn on the TV at the right time when a show you wanted to watch was broadcast, or you would miss it. There was a time in my youth when VCRs had not been invented yet. Also, in my town, we had 5 stations. 3 were broadcast network stations and 2 were PBS. If you couldn't find anything on one of those, you had to find something else to do. A Story 39. When I was 9, I walked to the local DARS. He looked at my foot, sent me to the hospital for x-rays. I walked to hospital, got x-ray done. The radiologist told me to go back to the doctors immediately with the x-rays in my hand. The doctor surgically removed a piece of glass from my foot that had been in there from an earlier event that year and sent me home in an ambulance. No adult was with me. My grandchildren cannot believe the story. Story 40. Not being able to know something because no one in your area knew either. Hoping with all your might that the library had a book that could answer your question. And if not, then actually having to ask a librarian to order a book from whatever magic librarian land they had access to, and waiting weeks for it to come, all so you could learn about the question you had. I was a kid with a lot of very specific questions. It made my skin crawl and genuinely burn. We didn't know why. I didn't know that wasn't normal. I have now learned that is because of autism and OCD. I didn't know that for everyone else, not being able to know something wasn't a physically painful experience. The internet has saved me from such a truly painful existence every time I had a question my folks couldn't answer. I do thank it for that. Another thing is taking a ton of photos on a road trip, not being able to see how they came out until getting home, sending them off to be developed, paying a bunch of money, and finding out half or more of them are blurry, overexposed, had the lens cap on, a thumb in the way. I can't even tell what that one was supposed to be, and finally getting a very few good photos out of the whole ordeal, LOL. Thankfully, my mom took a photography class and taught me what she knew, so it only happened a few times when someone else was in charge of the camera. Oh, that's another thing, LOL, having to take a class to learn how to use a camera. Now everyone can just point and shoot. No fancy buttons and dials and attachments. Of course, those still exist for professionals, but those used to be one of the only options we had, and they were expensive. Now everyone's got one. Of course, there's landlines and dial-up, but so many other comments have covered that already, LOL. But I'd like to mention paying for minutes and the origin of text acronyms, because we had to pay per character for every single text you sent. LOL Thenix T-Tile LY was a costly text at one point in my life, LOL. Story 41. Actually going places, like my childhood was very traumatic, not gonna lie, but at least we actually went outside. When I go out and see a kid, they almost always have a phone or something screen-related in their face, bro. I wasn't even allowed to look the direction of a TV screen in public, like in restaurants, let alone that. I'm 23 and was only an iPad kid at Bio Dad's house every other weekend. Bro, there are things from my childhood that I think even previous generations wouldn't understand. Let's just say just because it existed in my generation doesn't mean I had access to it as much, at least. Story 42. We'd get called in at night by a family member going outside and just yelling our name from the front steps. This technology was upgraded a few years later when Tommy's mom got one of those big dinner bell type things on her back porch. My uncle would whistle. Doug's mom would do a little toot 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 on her car horn. Tommy's mom would ring the bell. Colin's mom would yell his name and flicker the porch lights a few times. We became so accustomed to those particular call-ins and would be in the middle of whatever we were up to and tune into them like, "Colin, I think your mom just called you in," and all run out from the forest swamp and look down the street to see the lights flicking and be like, "Yup, well, see you in the morning." I also lament for the fact kids can't ding-dong ditch TP houses like we did growing up. Ring doorbells really put that to rest. My mom had some kids ding-dong ditch her house last year, then just went out there the next day. They were walking to school with the video like, "You're on video, don't do that anymore." Come on, Mom. We used to get such a rush from doing that as kids. Now I go and shovel those neighbors' driveways for free 30 years later each time it snows, like, sorry about that. Story 43. Watching a video backwards in fast motion before you watch it forwards at normal speed. Smacking the glass on your TV to clear up the image. Waving your arms around during a storm to get better radio reception. Key for the gas cap. Key for the door. Key for the ignition. Key for the wheel club. Pop starting a car with a dead battery, driving stick in general. Singing the lyrics wrong with confidence until you finally get corrected by someone who owns the case slip. Judging how bad a pothole is by whether the CD skips or the song changes entirely. Listening to pirated music that's sped up a little bit to skirt copyright. Writing a check, ting in silence. Reading a flammable book. Push-button light switches that hurt to press in the cold. Story 44. I rode my bike over the nearby mountain with a friend. Stopped at a random house and chatted. The people offered us a drink from their spring on hot days. Sometimes we stopped at other houses to chat if people were out. Sometimes we offered to help with their chores. They didn't know us the first time but waved or talked to us after that, like we were neighbors or family. We rode to another town, hung out, went swimming in the creek. Sometimes we actually remembered to bring swimsuits and rode back. Sometimes we'd get a lift from someone who recognized one of us and probably worked with our fathers or knew our fathers from the Legion, VFW, Elks, or another men's organizations. Dads belonged to a lot of them. No fear of being abducted or hurt. No worries about where we were as long as we were in when the streetlights came on. No need to be someplace all the time. Story 45. Running to the bathroom or kitchen during commercials. Having to be in your house with NBC on Thursday nights if you wanted to watch Friends. The only other time it was aired was during reruns. So if you missed it, you may never have another chance to see it again, until the DVD came out years later. Story 47. Writing on a piece of paper about events going on in your life, how the family is doing, what your plans are, etc. Then taking a postage stamp from your parents' stash and sticking it on the envelope you've stuck the paper in, going outside to the nearest post box, might be a couple of blocks, might be a couple neighborhoods away, and sticking it in the box and you listen to the swish thunk. Then you'd wait a few weeks to see what your friend, family member writes back. Story 48. Figuring out where to meet up with everyone in the neighborhood. Usually it was riding around until we saw the large pile of bikes in someone's driveway. I would also say scheduling everything around when something would come on TV. I remember new movies or shows coming on Disney Channel and being like, I need to be in front of the TV by 8 p.m. Story 49. Being required to wear dresses to public school. Checking for change in every payphone you passed. Having the school bus stop at the driveway of every student. Never wearing seatbelts in the car, and the front seat was prime real estate. We did run around town on our own from around 10, 11 years old, but not for hours, without mom knowing where we were. I lived in a very small town where everyone knew each other, going to the corner store to buy cigarettes for the folks, respecting our teachers. Story 50. Our high school was in the middle of town, and so for weightlifting class, we actually had to drive somewhere else. So as an underclassman, you had to find an upperclassman willing to drive you, and it would be a pickup truck, and 5 of us would just sit in the bed of the truck while the senior who was driving drove way too fast and hit those bumps to try and throw us out, and no one batted an eye. Story 51. Everyone drove by the time they were 12. Our area didn't have the funds to bus all the kids, so it was an unspoken thing that only the K-5 kids rode the school bus. If you were the oldest in the family or the only kid, you drove at 6th grade. Parents had no time to be your chauffeur. It was during the Carter administration, so gas was rationed. Whoever was able to get gas was the one who drove and picked up others. We could get gas on odd days, 5-gallon maximum, 55 cents a gallon. Story 52. Unsupervised time, unstructured time. On Saturday morning, I ate breakfast at home, then went to a local park near my house, played there all day, came back around sunset. There was no adult involved in my life for an entire 8+ hours. I had piano lessons once per week. The other 4 days, not much. I came home, I did homework, I played games, watched TV, called friends when the phone was available. Story 53. Walking around the neighborhood collecting glass Coke, Pepsi, soft drink bottles found on the ground, then taking them to the grocery store to collect 5 cents for each bottle. When you bought pop or soda in a glass bottle, plastic wasn't an option, you paid a 5-cent per bottle deposit, which you got back when you returned the bottles. Some people tossed the bottles, so it was like finding money on the ground. To buy a candy bar was 5 or 10 cents, so it was a sweet deal, huh? Story 54. Bottle rocket wars. We would put on jeans, jean jackets, goggles, hats, and grab the wrapping paper tubes we saved. Those tubes used to be pretty sturdy, and some had a metal end cap. Anyway, we'd battle in pairs. One of us would put the tube on our shoulder, and the other would light the bottle rocket and slap on the end cap. We would shoot those things at each other. Story 55. My mom and her friends used to take their cars and cruise, 25 to 30 miles per hour, the back roads drinking and laughing. Nothing crazy, just a 6-pack of Pass BT shorties split among 2, 3 ladies. Sometimes they would cruise the same path too many times and get pulled over. The cop would tell them to take their beer and go home. Repeat, tell them to take their beer and go home. No DUI, no arrest, no confiscated beer. They didn't even follow them home. What? Story 56. Telling your parents you were sleeping at so-and-so's house over the weekend, with them telling their parents they were sleeping over your house. But you were really at a party at someone's house whose parents were away for the weekend, going to see the midnight showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, seeing concerts with no adult supervision, or just generally up to some shenanigans you probably shouldn't be doing. Thank God there were no cell phones or Life 360 tracking our whereabouts back then. Story 57. Sliding down grassy slopes on cardboard boxes. Putting wax paper on the metal sliding board to go faster. Dragging each other down the street in cardboard boxes pulled by dog leashes tied to our bikes. Climbing trees and sitting up in them for hours reading comic books. Going to the newsstand to look for the newest Mad magazine or comic book. I loved all the Archie series, riding my cat around in my bike's front basket. Story 58. Having only one TV in the house and 4 people wanting to use it, I cannot even begin to explain the luxury that exists now with houses having multiple multimedia devices. But yeah, when the Olympics were on, that was the only thing which was ever on. I could never put on a tape of mine or even play any of my game consoles because mom or my brother might miss some dickhead swimming. The worst was test match cricket. Days of the most slowest possible, and like above, I couldn't get even a single hour during the day to watch whatever or play any games as dick features might have gotten bowled out. Story 59. We used to descramble old pay television signals with fine tuning, and when the cable companies caught on to that, it forced many kids to see their first sets of adult female nipples in an off shade of green or pink with the vertical sync all over the place. I need a video photo filter for this effect. Story 60. When I was growing up, my dad, he's a photographer, would regularly drive my siblings and I to Walmart, leave us in the parked car with the windows open, walk in to drop film off to get developed, which took an hour, and would hang out inside Walmart waiting for the film to develop while we waited out in the car. Then he'd pick up the pictures, come out to the car, and we'd leave without anyone questioning why a van full of sweaty kids was left out in a parking lot with no adult supervision. We'd be bored out of our minds and love it. Story 61. Spending most our time outside getting dirty, catching tadpoles and frogs playing tag, racing our bikes down the hill with one of our brakes broken, bloodying our elbows and knees rollerblading on the gravel, going to the neighbor kid's house to play, then running away from a beehive we found, bitten by bugs while exploring the fields behind the houses, finding a treehouse in the woods with your cousins and play fighting with sticks as swords, staring up at the sky and finding shapes in the clouds. Being free. Story 61. Read the newspaper each day. Hang out inside local stores for hours just reading magazines and not paying for them. Play pickup tackle football games with the entire neighborhood. Get dragged to different yard sales every Saturday morning by mom and dad. Hang your wash clothes outdoors on a clothesline with clothespins. Go trick-or-treating without adults. Just your best friends randomly wore suits with ties more often. Shined your own shoes. Yourself. I really miss this. Felt like we had more random cafeterias available growing up compared to today. I'm not talking school cafeterias, just public cafeterias. Decades ago, there was a cafeteria here at the big metro bus station. A nice variety, pizzas, burgers, pasta. Man, I really miss those sweet, open to the general public cafeteria days. Story 62. Having to walk down a street and see a guy masturbating in a car. Can't tell you how many times that happened throughout my childhood. One time, a guy pulled up in a car next to where my friends and I were standing, and he was completely naked. Like, who does that? This stuff happened way more in the 80s and 90s, but incidents like that now make the local news, and a manhunt ensues for the pervert who flashed children. When people say that the world is worse now, it's totally not true. We have improved, or have at least driven the degenerates underground, well, until Trump. Also, people used to make obscene phone calls. That never happens now. I received an obscene call at 6 a.m. once when I was a teenager. I told him to call back when I was awake, and hung up. That's how freaking normal that stuff was back then. I didn't even flinch. We really have come a long way. Story 63. Calling 1-800, collect from your school payphone after sports or other extracurriculars, dialing home and when prompted for your name saying, "Hamomitsmapikmup" as fast as you can. Probably saved a few bucks. Also, so glad I didn't have the experience of cell phones in high school. The most common portable technology available was calculators and watches. You absolutely knew a kid was dealing drugs when you saw them with a pager. Story 64. Texting before smartphones. You had to use a number pad to actually text, and you could do more than send a message to friends. I remember I used to be able to post a status update to Facebook with a text number. You could also text Google things like weather, zip code, and you would get an automated text back with a weather forecast. And my personal favorite, text song to 99161, and you would get a list of the last 3 songs played on that radio station. Story 65. Taping music from the radio. Burning CDs with your favorite songs, hurrying home from school to catch a show on Cartoon Network, because if you miss it, you're lost. Who knows when the rerun will be? Calling friends on a corded landline phone and first having to talk to their mom or some other adult before you can ask your friend if they want to hang out and no random chit-chat because you paid by the minute. Playing with friends unsupervised and staying past 8, 9, or even 10 p.m. Parents were like, "Where's my son? I don't know. Outside somewhere playing or whatever." Looking up stuff in the library for school because there was no Google, walking into the cockpit of an airplane and talking to the pilots as the plane is flying. For kid me, this was the most awesome thing I had seen. Life before 9/11s was simpler. Story 66. Here's a bizarre memory, calling the time phone number in Kansas City, and at the end of them telling you the time, it was just dead air and we would shout out phone numbers, addresses, names. Basically, it was our Tinder of the early 80s. And calling collect from a payphone and yelling your message to your parents before the operators would get your money. Story 67. Actually being incommunicado for hours, even days at a time, even when you were a kid. When I was 19, I toured the US and Canada in a drum and bugle corps. My parents dropped me off at preseason camp in early June and didn't hear from me again until mid-August when I was dropped off. I think I might have had one long-distance phone call from Montreal to let them know what day I would be getting home. 2. Having to plan things with your friends, as in getting 3 or 4 friends to show up at the same movie at the same time. It took the split-second timing and communication of a commando raid on U-boat pens. Story 68. Downloading a new CD from LimeWire being almost finished, and then someone picks up the home phone, disconnecting me from the internet and the process having to start all over again. I still have nightmares about internet from back in the day. Kids have no idea what it was like just trying to connect to the internet just so we could chat on AOL Instant Message. Story 69. One of 10-year-old me's chores was every second Saturday to remove the tubes from our Firestone TV, take them to the neighborhood grocery store, plug them into sockets on the tube testing stand, and buy replacement tubes if needed. The replacement tubes were stored in a cabinet underneath the testing stand, then return home, install all the tubes, and replace the back cover on the TV, plug it in, and let it warm up. Then fiddle with the tuning knobs until the clearest picture was obtained on each of the 3 channels. Story 70. Lunch on weekends or non-school days? Unheard of. There's grit and character in hunger. Feeding your kids in the middle of the day, anytime before 1995, was wildly unheard of. No snacks. The USDA and government guides to feeding children insisted they only eat at meal times so that they eat the whole plate. School lunch, yes, of course, that was impressed on parents that it was important. There were no commercials about weekend lunch or what we ought to be eating, so it didn't happen. Story 71. Lawn darts. Like any 80s kid, my friends and I never bothered with the right way to play. We'd grab a dart, say some stupid about the Great Spirit protecting us, and then launch it straight into the sky as high as we could. I can't tell you how our made-up scoring really worked, but it was something like first one to leave the circle lost 5 points. Last one standing in the circle earned 10. Ties were fine. And whoever was closest to the dart when it eventually landed got 25 points. Sure, kids today probably do dumb stuff, but we were literally throwing mini javelins straight up into the air and hoping they didn't hit us on the way down. There's dumb, and then there's Gen X dumb. Story 72. Do kids still play with rocks and in dirt unsupervised? I'd just be like, hey, can I go outside? And my mom was like, K, and I'd be out there digging through the dirt, turning over cinder blocks and boulders and logs the size of my torso, and squeezing through the briars to grab fresh blackberries to eat, all far from the back door and with plenty of trees to break line of sight. If I could convince my little sisters, sometimes we'd all go down the street to the park and play on the playground. Story 73. Detasseling corn. It's something that is only done in places where seed corn is produced. Hybrid seeds are produced by planting 2 varieties of corn in the same field and then ripping the pollen-bearing tassels off of one kind so that pollination happens all the other direction. The tassel ripping used to be performed by armies of young people covered in sunburn, bug bites, and cuts from the sharp corn leaves. They have machines that do it now.